So this is the presentation that I'm going to walk you through. The idea is that this session, we're going to be first looking a little bit at why some of the changes, what do those changes consist of. We're going to have a look at the midterm reporting template. For those of you who have funds that are not multi-year funds, this template will be applicable to you. Those of you who have multi-year funds, which I see some of you on the call, you'll be using the yearly report template, and I will explain that in a moment. So we're going to go briefly through the two templates to explain what are the questions, what's the structure, some of the guidance around how to address those questions. And then we're going to have a good part of the session just hearing from you and being able to respond to maybe some of the feedback or the suggestions of changes or comments that you may have. And as I said in the beginning, we're experimenting with this new reporting system. So our mindset, what we want to do is to learn together and see what works, what doesn't work. As we did with the application structure, many of you gave us feedback after the first round and said, we need to change some of the aspects of the process, the application form in itself, and we want to be able to adapt very quickly to all these observations that you make. And something that is really key for us is kind of what is the purpose of these reports? And in the past, you've also said, as for those of you who have been grantees in the past, that there's some frustration in sending a lot of very long, very hardworking documents onto Meta and not receiving a lot of feedback from the foundation on, what was the learning, what could be improved, not receiving as well information about like any of the aggregate data. So bringing together all the work that the different grantees are doing across the world and to be able to say, what does this look like in terms of impact? How are different projects doing in terms of their metrics, in terms of not only participants and contents they're bringing in, but also some of the qualitative metrics or what they're learning from their work and how you can learn from new approaches, from innovations, and adapt that into your work as well. So we really want to focus with these reports on information that will, one, help us use that to learn together and reflect on what's happening and what's the impact, what are the challenges, what are we learning from mistakes, from things that aren't going great, but also to be able to identify where the foundation or where peers in the movement can come in and support your work, where you're facing similar challenges or where you need more support from the foundation. And also for the regional committees, many of you have said, we want to interact more with the regional committee members. We want them to know more about our work, more about, beyond the proposal and the short feedback process. We want them to really understand what we're doing and to analyze our proposals based on that understanding. So the idea is that the reporting will help regional committee members, not in the sense of using the report to say, evaluate it, and then that the future funding will depend based on that report, but more so that they can also learn from what you're doing and can reflect with you together. So the idea is that after this midterm report, we will have learning sessions where we bring in the grantee partners with regional committee members, with foundation staff, so that we can reflect on what is happening in the region, what are some of the interesting tendencies, what are some of the challenges that we're seeing in the work. So this is really important because as we look through the questions and the way we're going to report, it's important to keep this in mind. Are we meeting this objective of learning and sharing knowledge together rather than, just a strict evaluation or checking a box? I forgot to say in the beginning, but if you we're quite a few people on the call. We've done this session with fewer people, so it's allowed for more interaction. But if there are any real like important questions as I speak, then just raise your hand, and I will, stop so we can address them. So where can we find more information? As the meta world is sometimes complex, where we are linking in here the main 2 pages where you'll be able to find information. Can you just confirm that you're seeing a meta page? I'm seeing Eric on screen, if you can just confirm. Yeah, thanks. So I'm sorry I can't follow the chat at the same time, but if my colleagues who are co-hosting can help, that would be great. Okay, so here you'll be able to see where you have the application form templates in different languages. If you scroll down, you'll be able to see the reporting forms. And so here we have the midterm learning report. This midterm report is for those grantee partners that do not have multi-year funds, who are general support fund grantees who don't have multi-year funds. And you will be reporting the midterm halfway through your program. So this will vary depending on the length of your grant. If it's a year, it will be 6 months down the line. If it's less than that, if it's 6 months, it will be 3 months down the line. So there's one midterm report. We are in the process of translating it into all the main languages, and hopefully they'll be up on Meta in less than 2 weeks' time. I have linked in to the French presentation a machine translated version of that midterm report, and I think Mercedes can also link in the Spanish translated version, but they're not professional translations. We're in the process of doing that. What happens after the midterm report is that the program officer, your regional program officer, will analyze that report and has 15 days to analyze it and to invite you to a conversation. And the idea of this conversation is not to repeat what you've written in the report. If you find that in the conversation, you're just explaining what's in the report, then we failed. That's not the purpose. The purpose is that once the program officer has analyzed the report, you can go through some of the aspects where it would be interesting to go a bit deeper. And for example, if you've highlighted an interesting approach that has worked well with partners, or to bring in newcomers and retain newcomers, which is an issue that a lot of you have written about as challenges, then maybe we want to analyze that approach more and think of how we can share that approach with others. So it's to go deeper into some of the information that's in the report, or if you've expressed in your midterm some challenges that you're not going to be able to meet some of the goals that you set, or you're going to have to shift them and adjust them, that's the space where we can talk about that in more detail. So it's also a learning session. It's the program officer that is in charge of writing down all the information that comes from that report, but you will have access to that report, so you can also edit it, or if anything was missed from that conversation, you can complement it. But it is the program officer's responsibility to have that documented on Flux. The midterm report, it's your responsibility to put it on Flux, and we've included in the presentation a short, sorry, I'll just skip to that quickly so you can see where it is, a short tutorial that we did of where on Flux you will find the reporting template. You should have it on each of your cards, and you'll find reports that are due, and you will be able to directly put your report onto Flux. As we did with the application form, we do have the Google Docs template so that you can do your report first on a Google Docs, and then once that's ready, you can put it on the Flux system. Again, why are we using Flux? As this is important, and it's the same as the reason why we're using Flux for the proposal applications. and making it public on Meta. So we will also have all the reporting automatically put on Meta, so it's open to all the communities. But Flux allows us to pull that information and aggregate all that information so that I can, and this is mostly my responsibility with the team, is to analyze what's happening in all the regions. What do these metrics look like? What are some of the tendencies? What are some of the challenges? And to be able to discuss that with you. So in order for me to be able to analyze all that information together, the system is what helps us do that, which we can't easily do on Meta. And so I'm hoping that when we have learning sessions in August and September, you'll be able to see the value of how we're analyzing that data and help us analyze that data better so we get a fuller picture of the impact of grantees' work. So this is why there are limited character spaces. I know it can be very frustrating sometimes. We want to write a lot of descriptions of the work, the important work that you're doing. The idea is that on Flux, the information is more limited, it's more concise, precisely, so we can do that analysis for the 400 grants that we have in the world. But you can, of course, annex, include any documents that you would like, which are important to tell the story of your work. So we're not restricting your reporting, we're making it more concise so it can be analyzed, but you can include documents that support that if you want to describe your activities in more detail, or if you want to link in interesting videos or presentations or dashboards or any other material that more visually can tell the story, the important story of your work, and that can be shared with others. I'm just going to go back 1 second here to the Meta page. Can you just confirm that you're seeing the Meta page? Yeah. Okay. The other place where you can find more detailed information, so this is the place for the templates, is if you click here into reporting requirements. Here you can see a table that summarizes what reports I have to fill out depending on the type of grantee partner I am. So if I am general support and I'm not multi-year, then I do the midterm report, and we've linked in the template here to help you also. The midterm conversation between program officers and you. Then you'll have a final report, which will be at the end of your grant period. The same system applies. You will submit your report up to 1 month after you finish your grant. So for those of you finishing in December, it will be in January. The program officer has, I think, up to 3 weeks in this case to analyze the information and call you for a final conversation. So it's the same system. The only difference here is that the final report obviously has a few more questions where we're looking at the final results, but also reflecting a bit on what does this mean for your work as you go forward? What are some of maybe the organizational achievements or challenges you've had? And we're going to look a little bit more into you telling us as well where the foundation can be more supportive of your work. So that final report, as much as you learning from your work and sharing that with us, it's also us learning from your feedback and how we can improve. So it's also an evaluation of us and our work as a foundation. So now I'm going to go into the midterm report, just so that we can walk through it and we can look a little bit at its structure. There's a little bit more information on this page, which would be interesting for you to look at. I've explained it here, but kind of some frequent questions that have come up, how will this reporting be used? Will it be published on Meta? So you can have a look at that. And if you have any further questions, please reach out to your program officer. And I'll also share my details at the end of the meeting. So now we're going into the midterm reporting template. Can we just have a check to see if the speed that I'm speaking at is okay for translation? Michelle, can you let me know. Please speak slowly. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Okay, so I'm going to go a bit slower so we can capture the translation. So this is the general structure for the midterm learning report. You're going to have a first section, which is understanding your work. Then we're going on to looking at some of the metrics, and then the financial reporting and compliance. And then just kind of some boxes you have to check for the administrative aspect. These questions are common questions that have come up, and I've already included some of the answers that we have to those questions. So like I said, if the spaces are reduced, how do I express the full story of my work? So we've explained why some of the spaces are reduced for analysis, but that you can obviously include all the multiple documents, especially things that you think can be shared with others. So we have a resource space, and by topic, by thematic area, by different things that people are developing per wiki project, we can share some of those resources with others. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this in the metrics, about how we really want to focus beyond the numbers on understanding the impact of your work and understanding those numbers. So we're just not counting number of participants and number of contents, which is something that you have always, as applicants, as grantees, said that doesn't tell the full story of your work, that the numbers are very limiting, that you do a lot more beyond just bringing in contributors or contents, but you're working on awareness, you're working on impacting people's lives in a different way. So that is something that we are very interested in you capturing, and I will pause there and speak more about it in the metrics section. So the first part of understanding your work, I've included here some tips. Don't take them as a restriction, like you have to talk about that, but just maybe some ways that you can address this question, answer this question. So for example, when we're talking about describing your strategies and what was worth highlighting, or what was worth, that was really important in achieving your goals, the idea here, and this is different to maybe past reporting, where you've gone into a lot of detail of explaining each and every one of the activities, which is great for your own systematization, but for reading those reports and trying to gauge, what was the key thing that happened here? What can I learn from this? It's very difficult. And I've gone through a lot of reporting, and it takes me hours to go through a report and really get that key information. So the idea is to not go into all that operational detail. If that's important for your organization, for your team, then you can do that in a document and annex it. But it's more about, what were those key strategies that you implemented? Did you try any new approaches? Did that work? If it didn't work, why not? And what have you learned from that? Also, if you've encountered obstacles, as we always say, learning from mistakes or things that haven't happened as you expected is as important than the successes or things that have gone very well. So we really want to look at some of those challenges and how, as a team, you've reflected on them, and what are some of the things you're going to do if this is the midterm point to address those challenges, or if you need support to be able to address those challenges, either from the foundation or from peers. And as maybe some of you know, we're leading a program, peer learning program called Let's Connect. So this is an opportunity to identify, this organization is facing a challenge with, training in wiki data, or retaining newcomers, and this organization is doing something really interesting. This report will help us make that link and find spaces where people who maybe don't naturally connect can connect and learn from each other. Several of you already connect, and you do that, and you have a lot of spaces to do that, but maybe some newer organizations don't have that knowledge of who can help them with some of those challenges. So those challenges or difficulties are very important. How are different communities participating and being informed about your work? And here it's really interesting to look at not the participation only in numbers, but how are people engaging? So many of you say it's important that a lot of participants don't necessarily become editors, and we can't judge the success just if they edited, but some of them go on to organize work, or some of them go on to bring in partners or raise awareness about Wikimedia. So how are those participants engaging after you've, they've been into an event or a training, or you've done some work with them? Several of them of your projects are working on training. So beyond them saying that the training was good, or that they assisted, that they participated, maybe some of the perceptions and the skills that they've learned in that training that they can use in their lives or for Wikimedia. So I'm not saying you need to evaluate all of this. And I know several of you have, expressed that you have difficulties going into that deeper evaluation because of the resources, your team capacity. Many of you are working as volunteers. You don't have the staff to do this. But where you do have that capacity, it would be interesting to start reporting a lot of that information that comes in conversations about what is the impact you're having on those participants beyond the numbers. And for those of you who want to do that, but are finding it difficult, then that's an opportunity for us to look at what resources do you need to do this? How can we support you? And there can be simple ways to do this that don't require a lot of interviews, a lot of surveys, a lot of focus groups, but maybe just some simple ways that you can gather this information. This is a really important point here is in your application, you said that you wanted to learn from your work and answer some questions. And there were really interesting questions there about, are our trainings effective? What makes somebody come back to continue participating after one event? But sometimes with the data that you are collecting, and this relates to what I was saying before, we're not answering those questions. We're looking at numbers. And I understand why a lot of the proposals are focused on numbers, because the foundation has talked about those numbers for so many years. And yes, those numbers are important so that we can see how we're contributing to contents, to participants, to editors, to organizers. But they're not really answering those questions of, did somebody learn? Was my training effective in terms of building skills? Was my event effective in making people really excited about coming back? And so we need to, this is a good point in the midterm report to analyze, am I really collecting the information I need to answer those questions that I wanted to learn from my work? And this is where we can look into some of the tools or the approaches or things you can do. We were discussing this with the group from Latin America, some of the grantees, and they said, we really don't have a capacity to do an interview or to do a focus group or to do a case study on participants. And I said, why don't we look at doing it in a very simple way? A short conversation after the event or during the event, or there can be multiple ways of collecting this data that we can start trying. And if we can't do it, that is already something very interesting to see that our new grant proposals need to include resources above the resources that you already have for your programs and for your staff and for your volunteers, resources specifically for having the time and the team and the capacity to do better learning and evaluation. So it might not be in this grant, but at least we've identified that that's something we want to do, and we can do it in the next grant. And regional committees can really focus on helping you include that in your proposals and funding those needs as well. So I've said a lot about the metrics already, as you can tell that as my role is learning and evaluation, that's the thing that I'm very interested in, because this is where we'll be able to gather data to tell the story of the impact that your work is having. I just want to briefly say how you will fill this information in on Flux. The metrics that you included in your proposal will automatically appear on Flux. So if you said, for example, our target is to reach 15 new editors, then you will see the number 50 there. The idea is that you can focus on not only saying, yes, it was 50 or it was 40 or it was more than 50, but you can really analyze that and comment on it and explain, what helped you reach that target, or if you didn't reach that target, what were some of the difficulties, or anything that you gathered from the qualitative data, about what those participants felt, or their perception, or the skills they learned. You can also include that here. And it's very important that when we talk about metrics, we're not only looking at the numbers, as I say, but it can also be the qualitative metrics. So feedback from participants, and that can be a metric that you included and you describe their, the results of that analysis. Or it can be, we documented a new learning that we have, or we have a training manual, and that was our metric. So the metrics can be beyond just a number. It can be a document. It can be a sharing that you did with peers. It can be several other things. So if you find there are metrics that you didn't include in your proposal, but you find that as you are implementing, they became relevant or interesting, then you can add them, or you can also explain why some metrics you're no longer using because they weren't actually that important. So you have flexibility here. The important thing is to explain why, why something was added or why something was taken away. And also we want to learn what tools or methods you're using to collect that data, so we can learn from each other too. As I was saying, there's sometimes challenges in, how do I collect that data with limited staff or money or time? And if somebody else is doing something very interesting or different, we can learn from those methods, right? You can link in, if you're using dashboards or any other type of numerical data analysis, you can include that there. So at the end in Flux, you will see a summary of your metrics with the target, the results, the comments and the analysis, and the tools that you've used. Again, not only the numbers, you can put in qualitative metrics too. And please reach out to me or to your program officer if you having doubts about this, you're finding it difficult. You will not be evaluated by if you include all of this qualitative analysis or not. It will help us understand the impact of your work better beyond those numbers. But if that is not possible for you to do in this proposal because of your capacity, there is no problem. It will just help us identify that need in the future, so it is included in your grant budget and timetable. I think that is really important, because I don't want to make any organization nervous. Oh, now we have to do all sorts of very in-depth analysis. We want this, as I said, precisely so that you don't feel only that we're sticking to the numbers and it's only, participants, contents and editors and nothing else is measured. That has been something that grantees have questioned. They've, asked for changes, and this is what we hope that the new learning reports will allow for. Finally, there are a few more questions about maybe some of the challenges you've had collecting data. And then at the end, the financial reporting, you can use the template that you use to make your budget, either the one that we provided or your own. But some organizations might want to report in a different format. That's okay as well. You don't have to stick to the format you used for your budget, but obviously it's easier for for us, if we can see clearly what you budgeted and what was your expenditure, if there are any changes in the midterm to the budget or to any of the financial issues that we should discuss. And this last question is that part where in any moment of the report, we want you to tell us, what your experience has been like as a grantee, what can we do better? So this is a great part for you to give us feedback as well.